What is going on YouTube? Back making out of a brand new Crypto TV episode. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Bitcoin and some of the altcoins in regards to how they will indefinitely help us figure out where Bitcoin's headed in 2020. We'll be looking at Litecoin, Ethereum, and XRP, mainly focusing on Bitcoin and its charting. We'll also be going over a couple of interesting things on the coin market cap, but otherwise, if you guys are new to the channel, definitely make sure to subscribe, turn on post notifications, leave a giant thumbs up, and let's jump into today's episode. So guys, yesterday we left off in an interesting position. We were looking at the monthly charts in regards to the fact that there's a lot more buying power now over selling power, which we saw come early 2019. And you can see we started to see history almost repeating itself in 1 and 2 right here. You'll notice the same patterns are actually forming. You can see right here with this bottom uptrend withholding the coin, and you can see that we ultimately broke bearish out of what appears to be some sort of descending fractal. I did draw an uptrend here, but you can see the fractal is forming right here, and then they tend to break bearish. So we're calling a small short-term move to the downside, followed by an even bigger rally to the upside. Now, as I just jump into the current coin market cap, you can see a couple of things. Markets are up, and by that, it kind of helped me figure out where exactly I should move some lines, because as we know, cryptocurrency technical analysis is not set in stone. There's obviously things changing and patterns being manipulated all the time, so we have to adjust our charts to kind of follow and figure out where exactly the pattern ends and where we could potentially predict a breakout or a correction to the downside. But you can see that with all these coins breaking to the downside, we have some sort of dip that formed, some sort of U coming into shape right here. Majority of the coins are up about 1 to maybe 2% at most, really nothing to be too gung-ho about. But you can see as we look into the Bitcoin pattern, I do have some very interesting things here. So I know a lot of you guys do not like this overlay here, and that's totally fine. We really don't even have to use that. We can go off of previous history right here, and more so that's how we have to base things right here. But if we don't, we can continue to discuss the fact that there is some sort of massive bearish fractal forming on here. And that's kind of where I want to talk about in today's episode. It's the fact that Bitcoin does have some sort of bearish fractal forming on the coin. Whether or not you want to consider it to be an uptrend, there is some sort of very strong resistance in the coin that does ultimately have us correct to the downside every single time. Notice each time we retest here, we end up breaking bearish with quite a bit of force. And you can see this happens numerous times where we have some sort of uptrend and then we correct to the downside. Now notice, I don't think there's much going to change in regards to when we retest the resistance once again. I do believe we will be experiencing that same correction to lower levels. I know this does come into consideration that we could be anticipating some sort of 36 or 37% correction or retracement to the downside. Notice how I do have that drawn out right here, and it would ultimately push us down to the bottom support of the bearish fractal. The one interesting thing that I'm noticing is, although we do have some sort of support that kind of cuts through the bearish fractal, you'll notice we're also intertwined with the high-low MA, and when we use previous history, the last time we were kind of trending sideways inside of here, we broke bearish. And that's the biggest thing that I want to, you guys to notice. It's only a short-term correction to the downside that we do have to consider. The fact that we are trending inside of here, similarly with how we've done in 2018, does give us some reason to believe that we could be anticipating some sort of correction to the downside. Now notice this doesn't really mean it's a bad thing. It's a small correction. It only lasted about a month, and you'll notice ultimately right after that correction did happen, we managed to shoot up to prices above $13,000. So even with this small correction, 2020 could be holding the same surprise as 2019 did as we move forward. The only difference thing now is that we are aware of it and we are prepared to pretty much profit off of these major moves. Obviously, the major dip does hold quite a bit of potential in regards to shorting the cryptocurrency, as well as there is ton of potential in longing and leverage trading the coin as it heads up. Notice these wicks are the ones that we really want to attack and make the most profit off of. So notice that we do have probably like 2 more weeks, if not 3 more weeks now, of consolidation within this high-low MMA before we once again retest the top resistance here on the weekly charts. And then we'll ultimately short the cryptocurrency with DueDEX right here. I'm getting prepared, putting money into my DueDEX account, getting ready, and also taking advantage of their sign-up bonus. In fact, and in regards to the position of the correction that is ultimately ahead. The fact is, once we get here to have everything set in stone and correct and ready on our DueDEX chart, the second we see the opportunity to invest, we'll obviously sell and short the coin. And I like to leverage trade with about 10 times. Now, this is a link in the description. Definitely check that out if you're interested. I believe it's the first link. And this will ultimately help you correct and capitalize off this massive correction to the downside. Now, there are charts that we can use in calculators to pretty much figure out the amount of money we could make off a correction like this, and we can use that in a later episode, but ultimately this is what we're anticipating. We're anticipating a very, very, very short-term correction followed by movements as we head higher up to the 2020 May halving, and that's the ultimate thing. It's the fact that during most halvings, we tend to have people buy the rumor and sell the news, so in anticipation for the halving to come, we ultimately will see the coin, Bitcoin itself, move up in price, similar with the graph that I had over here, as we head closer and closer and closer to the halving. And once the news is out and once the halving happens, I'm ultimately going to be experiencing or expecting to see some sort of correction to the downside. Now, I did mention in the beginning of today's video that I wanted to compare this to other altcoins. And I want to use Litecoin, for example, a coin that we really haven't talked about in quite some time now. But notice there is some sort of potential uptrend support right here that we didn't really discuss before. You can probably draw it out like that. I don't think it's that necessary, but in regards to the fact that there is some sort of massive descending fractal right here that we're all well aware of, does help us kind of figure out where exactly we're at in regards to price and where exactly Bitcoin's price is headed to. Now, notice that this massive descending fractal has pretty much been on the coin since May of 2019, and we've been trending down inside of here for the longest time. And every single time, once again, we test this top resistance, it ends with us crashing down to our bottom support. You notice it's happened over here. We've seen, or sorry, you can see it right there where we corrected to the downside. Even here where we've retested the support or the resistance, and then corrected to the downside. We rallied back up, retested resistance, corrected back down. And the same thing has happened over and over again where we retest the top resistance and fall back down to our support. Now notice that same thing is happening right now as we speak. Notice how we are once again retesting bottom support and we're slowly, gradually moving back up to retest that resistance, which most likely will ultimately end in another correction to the downside as we head lower into 2020 of cryptocurrency technical analysis. So ultimately, that's what we're expecting. We consider these to be more or less roadblocks that help us kind of figure out where the other cryptocurrencies are moving to. And in regards to the fact that we are getting very close to this resistance right here, does ultimately allow us to predict that we're going to see some sort of correction to the downside. Now, notice Ethereum also has a similar chart. All of these seem to be following Bitcoin in regards to their fractal. This descending fractal, this has a descending fractal, Ethereum has a descending fractal, everything's heading lower. XRP is a little bit different. It has more of a descending triangle than a bearish fractal, but for the most part, we do see this consolidation. And in regards to that, you can see Ethereum is once again retesting a massive resistance on the coin. It's ultimately heading lower as well. Now, notice on Bitcoin's weekly, as we focus in on the daily, you'll notice the very interesting thing that's happening. Notice how we've had a purple resistance here, and it's also acted as a support ever since May of 2019. Notice how we've used this to shoot the price up higher. This is a clear double top. We fell lower. You can see the M that actually formed as there's a resistance right here. And then we had a double bottom, which ultimately shot us up to higher levels. Now notice this comes across right here. We have more supports being retested, and eventually we do break below here. We correct lower, and now we're getting sandwiched in between here. Now notice if we do use this purple resistance and this white uptrend, we form some sort of ascending triangle. And now what's interesting is on XRP, we've also had some sort of ascending triangle. You'll notice on the 4 hour how these usually tend to break. They usually fall bearish, and then we could see either consolidation or more sideways trading. But you can see ultimately in the short term, the ascending triangle eventually broke bearish, and we collapsed lower. And now we're currently retesting the high-low MMA. But it's all within its massive descending triangle, which you can see is right here, clear as day. Just like this. So ultimately, what are we expecting to see within Bitcoin? Right now, you can see Bitcoin is about to retest once again its resistance up here. And then ultimately, I am anticipating it to not only hit its massive yellow, white resistance right here, but ultimately correct to the downside, about a 36 to 37% correction, 36 to 37% dip, followed by some strong support and some small correction to the upside, and then inevitably shooting up in price as we head closer and closer and closer to the May 2020 halving that Bitcoin should be having fairly soon. So ultimately, that's what we're expecting right now. Expect to see the dip. Ultimately, we will be shorting this coin on DueDEX the second we get that opportunity. Obviously, DueDEX is an awesome exchange, and I've made quite a bit of money off of here shorting the crypto, and I've showed you guys in advance. The only thing that we did last time was I did make a short that ultimately pump faked us. You can see right here, right back to the upside, where I thought was going to continue off down, and I lost about $40, a very small loss compared to what we've made off of the previous corrections, like you can see right here. So it does even out. Obviously, we do have some wins and some losses, but ultimately, when we can predict that the next correction to the downside is going to be right here come, about a week from now, about January 9th to January 12th or 13th, we should expect to see that correction and that dip to the downside. Notice on the daily, we're also going to get very close in retesting its high-low MMA, and I can almost bet you that they're going to meet right over here at this point. And then that's another reason to see more resistance, double resistance, if not triple resistance, pushing the coin and the price down lower. Otherwise, guys, that is going to wrap up today's video. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, turn on post notifications, leave a giant thumbs up, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Peace.